It's complex because you really are trying to learn two things at once. You're trying to learn how to organize your thoughts into a logical sequence to perform or complete some task, but you're also having to learn a whole new language, just like French or Spanish or German. And so when you try to do both of those things at the same time, your brain says, no, it's just too much for me.
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I am so glad you are with me. Today, we are talking to a new guest. His name is Robert Walsh, and he is from Excalibur Solutions STEM Academy. And it's so funny, I've already had people asking me about him, and this is part of our Homeschooling Every Subject series that we're in right now. And so this is one of those topics that I'm like, I have heard about STEM. I don't know a whole lot about it. So I'm going to bring in an expert to help you and to help me and to help all of us understand what STEM is and how we can implement this into our homeschool if you've got those, smarty pants who understand STEM. So we're going to have a great time this week talking with Robert. But before we do, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, BJU Press Homeschool. If you're looking for great curriculum that comes from a strong biblical worldview, check them out at bjupresshomeschool.com. And they've got something for everyone, whatever subject, whatever grade, whatever style of learning and teaching works best for your family. They've got something for you. bjupresshomeschool.com. Well, Robert, welcome to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I've had a good time chatting with you before we jumped on and hit that record button. And it's always fun to meet new guests and have people. I was looking for somebody to talk through the topic of STEM for this series that we're doing, because I know that this is one of those, topics and subjects that maybe a lot of moms are really comfortable with it, but a lot of moms are really uncomfortable with it. I would be one of those moms that's uncomfortable with teaching STEM to my kids and have no idea how I would do that. Thankfully, I have daughters who are not at all interested in this type. I shouldn't say thankfully. I'm not thankful that they're not interested. I'm thankful that I don't have to teach it to them. But it is fun. And I was looking for somebody to talk on this subject. And so I did some research and I saw that my good friend, Leslie Nunnery from Teach Them Diligently had interviewed you on this topic. And I thought, oh, well, that's great. So I listened to a little bit of your interview and I thought, oh, he's the perfect one. So I'm so excited. For those who are not familiar with you, would you introduce yourself to our audience and what it is that you do?
Sure. And thank you for having me. And I just want to touch on one thing you mentioned. Your daughters aren't really that interested. And I believe that maybe I can convince other families who are in that same boat that they should still invest a little bit of this because there are things they can get from it. But anyway, back to the introduction. So my name is Robert, and I did found the Excalibur Solutions STEM Academy about 4 or 5 years ago. Primarily because my children, like yours, weren't necessarily interested in doing this, but I have been a computer programmer for almost 30 years. I also have degrees in education. I have both a bachelor's and a master's degree in education. I thought, well, that's the perfect thing for me to do, to take what I know as a programmer and a technical person and blend it with what I know about education and create opportunities for homeschool families, particularly. It dawned on me when my own children got to high school and into college and really weren't interested in exploring this particular arena, that where and how you give your kids an education determines so much of the opportunities that they're exposed to. And then those opportunities turn into their future interests. And so if kids never have the chance to do computer programming or electrical circuitry or any of that kind of thing, the odds of them being interested in pursuing that as a career or in college are pretty low. Because they have misconceptions about it. They don't know whether they like it. That's how we learn what we like. We learn what we like by doing things. We learn what sports we like to play by playing those sports. So, this is no different. And so that's what motivated me to kind of go this direction and start the Excalibur Solutions STEM Academy.
Yeah, so cool. I come from a family I shared with you beforehand who was involved in, both of my parents actually worked on the space shuttle. At my whole childhood, basically, growing up, they worked for Rockwell, which worked with NASA and to build the space shuttle. It's so cool. My mom actually has still some of the original tiles that were used to build the physical space shuttle. And so I remember just growing up in that environment. And then I married a man who's very technical. He's very, he understands electronics and all that stuff. And I'm like, can we just talk about other things? Because my brain just doesn't go there. I just don't understand the world of technology, the world of math. My listeners know that I hate math. because I have a difficult time understanding it. And so for those moms like myself who just have a difficult time understanding math and sciences and technology and engineering and all of that stuff, explain to us what STEM is. Give us just maybe kind of start with a broad overview.
Sure.
And then, let's talk this week about how we can implement this into our homeschool.
Sure. And don't beat yourself up too much about not really understanding STEM, because it's actually a fairly complex topic.
Yeah.
First of all, it's an acronym. It stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. And that's about all that people agree on. So we'll get into that more in a minute, but you might also have heard of STEAM. STEAM is when we take STEM, Science, Technology, Engineering, Math, and we combine it with the arts. And then there's also an acronym STREAM, which is where you take STEAM and you add reading.
Oh,
now,
wow.
In my opinion, when you get to STREAM, you just have school.
Right.
Because why do we call out all of the different subjects? But anyway, as I mentioned, beyond agreement as to what the individual words stand for, there really isn't a clear and concise definition for what STEM actually is. It's kind of like a buzzword. It means different things to different people. Some companies sell project kits labeled STEM all over them that maybe have kids plant seeds to grow plants or vegetables. And honestly, in my opinion, that isn't really STEM. That's just science. That's what I call single subject STEM. There's another kind of a STEM project or a STEM project where you take something like a water bottle and you use cardboard and construction paper and markers and glue and tape, and you turn it into a rocket. Well, we're studying space. It's a rocket. It must be STEM. Well, honestly, no, it's a craft project. So that to me is called crafty STEM. Now, if you take that water bottle and you find some way to launch it, maybe some kind of a pressure, that the kid could press and launch it and then see how far or how high it travels. Or maybe you take a fan and you build a little mini wind tunnel and you stick your water bottle rocket inside and you see what kind of aerodynamic properties it has. Now you're getting to a STEM project. Lots of schools and homeschools, obviously, many of the students use technical devices to do their work, tablets or laptops or Chromebooks or whatever. And in my opinion, if you're just using the device to do an assignment, that really isn't a STEM assignment either, even though you're using technology, because you could do that without the technology. Schools use it as a substitute for a physical textbook, or they have kids fill out what could be just a printed worksheet, turn it in electronically, and somehow they say that's a benefit that they're, using the technical devices. Yes, they are learning a little bit of skills in digital literacy, which is something we can go into a little bit more later, but they're not really taking advantage of the technology. So to come back around to what I think STEM really is, I think that it requires an interdisciplinary component, and that means that it needs to include at least two of the individual disciplines. So maybe science and engineering or math and technology, and that you end up doing some kind of a project-based activity. Something that is authentic. And in the education sense, authentic means like grounded in the real world, something that is like what you would do out to solve a real problem. In the real world, we don't isolate subjects. You hardly ever go to a problem and say, oh, I know exactly the science I need to solve this problem. We have to combine everything that we know and blend it together. And so the best STEM projects are those that take a real problem and require the student to apply lots of knowledge, skills, and concepts and turn it into a solution that they could then implement through building something or writing a computer program or whatever. So the definition that I like to use for STEM is applying skills, concepts, and knowledge from science and math while either using or creating technology to engineer solutions to problems or to perform meaningful tasks. So I think that STEM needs to be a blend, not just science or just math.
Wow. Okay. That's good stuff. I have so many questions for you, but let's take a break. We'll be right back. Have you tried CTC Math yet with your child? Here's a testimonial from another happy homeschool mom. Amber said, I'm absolutely thrilled with CTC Math. It's a rare find that I've used with my children for more than 5 years now. I have 6 children using CTC Math, and each child has found it easy to navigate and very applicable. Thank you so much for all that you are doing in providing quality math lessons for my children. If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com. That's ctcmath.com. Join Apologia for the Homeschool Bootcamp, a free video series that provides practical guidance and wisdom from experienced homeschool parents. You'll discover how to equip your family for academic, social, and spiritual success. Plus, you'll discover how to build deeper and stronger family relationships. Homeschool Bootcamp covers how to break free from the public school mindset, daily planning, supporting students with learning challenges, homeschooling as a working parent, navigating the high school years, and much more. Find this incredible free homeschool resource at apologia.com/bootcamp. We are back with Robert. You explained in the first half of the episode kind of what STEM is. Talk about how we can start teaching STEM to our kids from the earliest age. How can we start implementing this and preparing them, especially for those? It's so interesting. It's one of the things I love most about homeschooling is that as parents, we know our kids best, right? We know what they're excited about. We know what they hate. We know what they love. We know how their brains are wired. And we start to learn that from the earliest ages because they're with us all the time. And so I've had many, many moms reach out and say, my kid loves science. My kid loves technology. My kid is going to be an engineer. He wants to be an engineer when he grows up, because they see that there's something in that kid that is bent that way. So especially for those kids, if moms and dads start to see that their child has an aptitude for this, how can they start laying that foundation for them?
Sure. So there are two free software tools that we generally recommend, and we use these in our own projects at the Excalibur Solutions STEM Academy. We recommend these for parents who want to get their kids started in STEM, particularly STEM that involves technology and engineering. So computer programming, electronics, the things that would lead to robotics or things like that. As I mentioned, they're free, so you're not going to go out and spend a lot of money on kits or components or whatever that you really don't know what your kids are going to be learning by completing those different projects. So it's a great place to start. The first of these two tools is one called Scratch. And Scratch is a computer programming environment. It was developed at MIT, designed specifically to make computer programming easier for beginners to learn. If you've ever done or tried to learn computer programming, you might have given up on it because it's just too complex. Well, it's complex because you really are trying to learn two things at once. You're trying to learn how to organize your thoughts into a logical sequence to perform or complete some task, but you're also having to learn a whole new language, just like French or Spanish or German. And so when you try to do both of those things at the same time, your brain says, no, that's just too much for me. And so Scratch, because it's what's called a block-based programming language, allows us to focus on the logic of the program without getting into a language. So all of the instructions that you need or that are available to you in Scratch are in color-coded categories down the left side of the screen. And you simply drag them into the center of the screen and you connect them like they're puzzle pieces.
Oh, wow.
And that's how you write your program. So you get to visually see this instruction is followed by this instruction, which isn't followed by this instruction. But even though it's simple in the way that you put the programs together, it still supports what I consider to be the 5 foundational concepts in computer science. You learn variables, you learn loops, conditional statements, which are just if, then, and else. We do that all the time in regular English. If it's raining, I should take my umbrella. Otherwise, maybe I should take my sunglasses. Functions, and then events and event handlers. So those are the 5 things that I think are foundational to computer science. And you find those 5 things in nearly every other programming language that you'll ever want to go learn, whether it's Java or Python or C or Scratch. They're in all of those languages. So if you learn them in Scratch, where you don't have to worry about the grammar and the syntax of an actual language, it's easier later to transition to something like Python, where you do have to type in the commands, but now the concepts aren't unfamiliar to you. You're comfortable with what a variable is. You're comfortable with how a loop works. And it makes it that much easier to transition to another language later. Scratch has a very large user community, and there are lots and lots of online tutorials and other guides to help you get started, some of them at the Scratch website, some of them at YouTube or wherever. But it's really easy to find things that will help your student get started writing projects in Scratch. Now, if you're a little skeptical of your child working in an online community, rightfully so. I mean,
sure.
it's great that all those tutorials exist, but everybody's definition of what's acceptable and for a student to be exposed to is going to be different. And so maybe their definitions and yours don't jive so well. You can also install Scratch locally and use it on your own computer where you don't actually have to create an account online.
Oh, okay.
And so you could still find videos maybe that show you how to use it, or you could use our product, which has lots of projects with Scratch. But you wouldn't necessarily then have to have an account, and your children wouldn't be exposed to whatever exists out there in the Scratch community. The second tool we like to recommend is one called Tinkercad. And Tinkercad's great because it's really multiple tools in one. Now, it's created by a company called Autodesk. And if your family, anybody you know, does AutoCAD for doing engineering or architectural drawings, AutoCAD is made by Autodesk. So it's the same company that makes this industry-leading 2D and 3D technical drawing tool. I mentioned it's several tools in one. The first of them, and probably what it's most well known for, is to create 3D models. So if you imagine, when you're a young child and you build with blocks, you have cubes and rectangular prisms and cones and cylinders, and you stack them up and make castles and whatever else with them. Well, you can do that in Tinkercad as well, but you're doing it virtually. You have all of these 3D shapes in a virtual sense. You drag them into a workspace, and then you can arrange them relative to one another. You can even merge them together. You can take one and subtract it from another one to create a hole or a hollowed out place in that. So you're learning things like spatial visualization. And you can even take those models that you've created and export them and print them to a 3D printer if you have access to one, so kids can make their own toys. The second mode in Tinkercad is one called Code Blocks. And Code Blocks combines the 3D modeling with programming. So instead of dragging those 3D elements around and merging them together manually, you're writing a computer program in a block-based language that's very similar to Scratch to program and manipulate the shapes that way. A third mode in Tinkercad lets you create and simulate electrical circuits. So things that electrical engineers would do. It has virtual components like LEDs and resistors and buttons and batteries, and it even has some complex microcontrollers like an Arduino and a microbit. If you don't know what those are, an Arduino is a single board computer that can be used to turn things on and off or take information in from various kinds of sensors that can be connected to it. So you write a little program, and the program manipulates all these things that are connected to it. In the Tinkercad circuits mode, you drag the components around in a workspace. You even connect them with these virtual wires. But then what's really neat about it is that you can simulate that circuit, and it's going to behave exactly the way the real circuit would behave if you were to actually assemble it. The microcontrollers like the Arduino can be programmed inside of Tinkercad, and they have a language that is, again, very similar to Scratch, block-based. So if you already have some experience with Scratch, you can leverage it in doing these projects in Tinkercad. But then Tinkercad also lets you see what the text-based equivalent of that block code would be. So it's a great transition for when you're ready to move from the virtual world of Tinkercad into the physical world with an Arduino and an electrical circuits kit or something like that, because you can only work in a text-based language when you're using a physical Arduino. So Tinkercad lets you sort of bridge that gap. The final mode in Tinkercad is a physics simulator, and I haven't spent much time experimenting with this, but it looks like a really great way to understand how the forces like gravity and friction and when two objects collide with one another, what happens to them. You can simulate all of those things in their environment and really start to understand forces and things like Newton's laws and other things that come up in physics. So those are where I would say to start, because like I said, they're free. You get a lot of exposure to a lot of different areas, and they're a great jumping off point. If your student then gravitates to one or the other, now you kind of know what to go look for if you do want to spend a little money on something.
Yeah. Do you see the deer in the headlights look on my face right now? Well, you used a lot of words that I don't understand, and that's okay. I love that.
But what's really cool about STEM education, particularly for a parent like you, is that you can learn with your child.
Yeah.
And I hope we do get the chance in a few minutes to talk more about how this can benefit students, even if they really have no intention of ever becoming a doctor or a scientist or whatever. There are so many things they can learn. And when they get to learn alongside the parent, then you can go out on your family outings and you can start making connections and say, this is just like what we did there.
Yeah.
There are just so many opportunities for that inside of STEM education.
Yeah. Well, I would love to talk about that. We are out of time. So we will end there, and then we'll pick up on Wednesday and continue talking about this. And we will talk about, how it can be a benefit to our students, even those who are maybe not bent this way. But I know that it really can be a benefit to them. So Robert, thank you so much. Tell our audience where they can find out more about you and your organization, Excalibur Solutions STEM Academy.
Sure. So the best place to find us is on the internet, on the web, https://stem.excalibur-solutions.com.
Okay.
And you can learn all about our programs there. You can find a little bit about my background, and you can find my link to my LinkedIn. So yeah, that would be the best place to go.
Okay. And of course, we will put that link in the show notes to make it easy for you guys to find. Robert, thank you so much for being with us today and for talking through all these fun and exciting and big words.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
It's all new for me, and I absolutely love it. So I appreciate you so much. And thank you guys so much for listening today. We'll be back with Robert on Wednesday to continue this conversation. If you have not visited our website, schoolhouserocked.com, go to our website. There's lots of stuff on there. You can watch the movie for free. You can look at all of our different podcasts. I think most of you know by now that my husband has a new podcast called The Thinking Dad, and it is doing great. I mean, that podcast has just taken off, which I love because it means that dads are listening, and a lot of moms are listening too, but lots of dads are listening and getting the encouragement that they need to be able to lead their families well in a way that is honoring to the Lord. So have a great rest of your day, and we will see you guys back here on Wednesday. Stay tuned at the very end to hear a clip of what's coming up next. Bye.
We've got an urgent situation. If we knew we were in a war zone, which we are because we live in the middle of a spiritual battle, we would not say, well, let's take a few days off while the battle's going on. We're called the spiritual battle. Let's step up and take responsibility for that.
Even if we're able to push the evildoers and the totalitarians back for another generation, if they've got the young people, it's over.
I often think about Daniel's parents, who you don't hear anything about. But they must have laid down the foundation for Daniel to be able to go into Babylon and not fall.
This is Garrett Hampton, host of The Thinking Dad. Join us for the first season at thinkingdad.net.
A STEM project often starts with a description of what it is that we want to accomplish. For example, we might say that we're going to write a video game, all right? To begin with, we have to figure out what's our game going to do. We need a plan. We probably need to break it down into smaller problems. So like in that asteroids games I mentioned, you've got to figure out how you're going to rotate the ship. You know, what keys are going to be used to turn it left and right? How are you going to shoot your missiles that can blow up the rocks? How are the rocks going to move? All of those are individual problems, and they all have to be solved independently and then integrated back into a whole. And if you think about that, that's how we solve problems every day.